Hey folks, welcome to the show. I am very excited to have you here for another episode of the Workplace Innovator podcast and another first-time visitor to this program, which is hard to believe, everybody. We are well past episode 400 now, and I'm realizing there are so many incredible thought leaders, industry leaders that I have met over the years, and they have not yet had a chance to have a conversation with DJ Mike P. So I'm excited to check one of those boxes off and welcome from San Diego, California, David George. David, welcome to the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thanks for having me here.
Well, it's wonderful to finally chat with you. We have known each other for a long time via the IFMA community, the Workplace Evolutionaries community. What a wonderful group of workplace leaders and strategists. Yeah. You among them. Your proper title, David, is both CEO and founder of CRUX Workplace. I want to hear all about that. And managing director of IPWC Limited. And as my audience will hear in a moment, there's a little bit of a British accent or a little bit of an original English accent, I should say, as you share your story. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So let me just tell you a bit of background first, Mike. I was born in the middle of the last century. I'm very old. And after a kind of a reasonable education, I decided at the age of 16 it was time to leave school because my father ran a small engineering business and I thought I was going to be an engineer. I quickly realized that I wasn't cut out to be an engineer, Mike. And my buddy suggested I join the BBC. I'd always been fascinated with buildings and construction and such like. And I joined the BBC as a handyman in the radio training studios where we had reel-to-reel tape machines. Yeah, and my job was to cut tape from the floor and make sure the equipment was ready for studio managers to be trained. And of course, a lot of that is a profession that no longer exists in the kind of world where we have digital streaming and such like. And that started a 21-year career at the BBC. I did pretty much every job you could think of in the kind of workplace arena. I went from being an assistant facilities manager, regional portfolio manager, major developments, project construction, project management over the 21-year period. Ended up actually leading some of their mega projects, some of the largest ones in the UK. And then we had a major reorganization at the BBC at the end of 21 years, and I was unfortunately headhunted to set up a workplace consulting team in 2005, 2006 for one of the major service providers in the UK. Spent 10 years building that team, became very successful, and I thought, why am I working for somebody else when I could do this for myself?
Right.
As you do when you get to kind of middle age, you think, I can do this. And so I set up IPWC, which is Independent Property and Workplace Consultancy in the UK. And 5 years into that, I thought, that place across the pond looks pretty big. I'm sure there's some real estate and some office stuff over there. So we launched over here in March 2020, but we weren't the only thing that was launching in March 2020.
Wow.
Yep. the pandemic came along. Yeah, it was an interesting time, and I did actually lean on your podcast a lot at that point in time, trying to learn the language a little bit, and learn how things were done over here. But we were very lucky. We picked up contracts straight away, and that's when CRUX Workplace was born. So in the UK, IPWC, and over here we have CRUX Workplace, and it's been great ever since. And I am, as you suggest, a regular attendee at all those kind of conferences.
Yeah. In fact, I was going to ask you when you first discovered the Workplace Innovator podcast or any of my content online, and sure enough, many people did during that COVID early pandemic period. And we were all so curious to learn what was going on across not just the States here, but also the globe, and help each other and build that community. And that's where I first met you, either on one of my live streams. We were trying to figure it out, or maybe on the Mosh Pit live stream, or David Gray and Jamal's gathering each Friday, which was so essential during that time. And then we did finally meet in real life, IRL, as the kids say, at a Workplace Evolutionaries event at World Workplace. And you are an ever-present figure there, sharing your expertise and knowledge. And I want to hear all about it. I want to hear about what you think we and my audience especially should be thinking about here in the middle of 2026. It's crazy that time seems like yesterday, but now we're 6 years beyond those first disruptions and settled into a new normal. And I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure you do as well. So we'll get to it here in a moment, David. But you know me, the thing I like to do to break the ice and to get to know my guests a little bit better on the personal side is ask about music. And whenever I have someone from UK origins on the call or on the show, I get very excited because I'm a kid from the 80s who grew up with the second British New Wave, or British, I guess the British Invasion 2.0, which was what I called New Wave music.
Yeah.
But what about you? What gets you excited? What inspires you in the way of music?
I predate you by a couple of decades, I think, Mike.
Okay. You're the first generation, the first British invasion.
Yeah, maybe. I kind of grew up a time when I think was the best music in history. And when Queen were at their top, David Bowie was there, even the Rolling Stones were still hanging around, and so were the music from the Beatles. You know, I had an old Ford Cortina car when I was 17, and I had the cassette tapes you'd put in it, and that was considered modern because my buddies had like a 4-track machine in there, or 8-track in their car. But
I love it.
They were still being played on the radio and on the TV. And I have very diverse tastes then, you know, everything from AC/DC to the Stranglers. And I actually was, this is going to make you laugh. I actually was a DJ at that time, a 16-year-old, twin really? Vinyl decks. My buddy had made all the electronics. I made all the cabinets for it and the speakers and lights. And we would do discos for the local community, where I used to live in a small village. And so I was really kind of big into the disco movement, the late 70s and early 80s, and that kind of thing was my thing. It was a great time. But for me, the one artist that really kind of resonated me was Elton John. And I was lucky enough to see him here in concert in San Diego only 3 years ago. And he started with Benny and the Jets. And Benny and the Jets, that first opening sequence of the piano, I just ended up crying and singing for the whole evening whilst Elton John was on stage at Petco Park. It was an amazing, amazing evening.
Unbelievable. Dun, 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 dun,
That's
dun.
Something like that.
I'm going to make you cry, David. I don't want to do it. But Benny and the Jets.
That's it.
That's fantastic.
That's the one, yeah.
So many good artists. We could spend the whole time talking about that era of music because it was what just predated what I was referring to. And Bowie and Queen obviously came together with one of the greatest collaborations of all time. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding. Bling, bling. Yeah. We're not talking about Vanilla Ice, everybody. We're talking about the original.
Under Pressure.
David, the question I also like to ask is an inspirational one. Do you have a favorite quote or something you could share with my audience to get us started here?
Okay. I started to manage people from a very young age. I was 22 when I first had my management role at BBC, and everybody in my team, 45 of them at the time, were at least twice my age, apart from the girl in the print room. And even from back then, my kind of role was that I felt that I needed for my team to be successful in order for me to be successful. And I got a lot of joy out of seeing people grow and move on to jobs where they really thrived. And for me, at that particular point in time, the motivational saying was, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man a fish and you feed him for life. Okay.
Yes.
And that was my mantra. I believe each of us is on a journey, and sometimes we collide for a few minutes, a few days, months, years, but we're always on our journey. And my role was to help people coming through my team to continue their journey and be successful in the way they're going. And I'm still very passionate about that. But I feel as we go through life, the events that surround us and happen to us and those that we love and maybe lost too influence how we feel. And so for the past 10 years, my own motivational quote has been, live life fully for today, plan a bit for the next, for we know not what tomorrow will bring. And it's about being present in the moment. It's about being, enjoying now for now and not always trying to look ahead and not think about you'll save it till tomorrow or the day after. So that for me resonates deeply. And I only came to that realization in the last 10 years prior to that, my role had been about project management, always looking ahead, never looking for today. And you realize that, and when things happen to you, that you have to live for today. So live life fully for today, plan a bit for the next, for we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring.
Wow. Really nicely said, David. I couldn't agree more. Really aligns with my philosophy as well. And appreciate that sentiment and the idea behind it, because time does keep moving, and we will look back and it's all beyond, it goes by quickly is what I'm trying to say. So thank you for sharing that. With that in mind, I often talk in terms of innovation being the same. And this podcast is called the Workplace Innovator Podcast. And here you are, someone with decades of experience in workplace strategy and managing people and understanding our places and spaces. And this innovation element often, makes people think of technology or the greatest new iPhone or what AI is going to do. But you and I agree, we chatted a little before clicking record, that it's more than that. It's about the people and the human experience. But what would you say when you think about the name of the show and my audience listening to us, what they need to do to be a workplace innovator today?
I picked some of this up in the conference actually recently is that, to me, it's about enabling people to really be at their best when they're in that workplace. And it's all about the people, Mike. It is a people-centric thing. How can we help them perform what brings them joy at work, actually? What helps them connect, learn, build relationships, and progress their output. So my role is to think of how can we create an environment and experience that delivers that. And I think for so many years, people involved in office design were designing on a set of old-fashioned metrics and given standards and procedures, and actually forgot about the people who are in the space. And one of my great mentors was Frank Duffy from DGW, who I had the pleasure of working with back in the last century at the BBC. And that kind of really opened my eyes to actually just talk to the people, just understand their job, understand their role, understand how they work, how they interact, and build around them, build around to support them in that. And so whilst it's not an innovation in such that I'm not going to talk about new technology, and I'm certainly not going to talk about AI, I'm talking about let's connect with people at the start of the journey and work with them through the whole journey, because in that way we create an environment that really meets their needs and that they buy into and they run with. So innovation for me is about engaging with people, because the way they work today is very different to the way they worked when the traditional American office was designed back in the 1980s and 1990s.
So true, David, and so well said. I agree 100%. It's something that we focus on here on this show. In the short time we have together, I like to inspire and encourage the listeners to know that they have a role to play in impacting the lives of other people, whatever their responsibility, whether it be a facility management or real estate role or something more people-centric or HR, IT. It all comes together in this workplace environment. So I'd love to hear just a little bit more of your perspective here. This opportunity to chat. We'll see each other again soon, I'm sure, at World Workplace this fall. We've seen each other in the past. Each time, things often are the same in many ways because that human element doesn't change, but then we feel like the world is moving fast around us. Hybrid working has become it's become a challenge for many organizations. You've written about this eloquently on your LinkedIn profile. In fact, I'll drop a link below, everybody. Check out David's work. He shares a lot of great content, a lot of great articles. You'll be better off for reading them. But David, what are you most focused on here in 2026 as you work with clients and you hope to impact our industry?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's about helping people discover that offices that work well, allegedly for their parents, the age of the briefcase, if you remember that, the paper, the handwritten notes. I could tell you about handwritten memos, and fax machines, the dawn of the computer, and how every meeting was pretty much face-to-face, with paper, unless you were one of those poor individuals who had to dial in from somewhere on one of those spider phones. Do you remember those things in the middle of the conference room?
Sure, yeah.
You try to participate in the meeting, right? But everybody else in the meeting room was talking over you and you never got your chance to have your say. that was how our parents worked. And why is it we're still creating offices which replicate that? After all, the car that you felt was perfect for you in the 1980s, my car in the 1980s, that Ford Cortina, if we were driving that car around today, would we still think it's, the most suitable form of transport for us? No, we've gone into much more modern cars with air conditioning, with electric vehicles and such like. We've changed our tools. And so for me, it's about sharing this journey I've been on for 26 years when we first implemented what we call hybrid working now over here in the UK. And I did a project for the BBC in Birmingham where we implemented what we call agile working or smarter working, which is hybrid by another name. 26 years of doing this, this huge bucket of experience, which I just want to share with people. And it's not about, hey, we want to come and do work for you. It's like, hey, look, do you know there's this opportunity exists to create a better working environment for people? And so for me, that's what I feel my role is to kind of share, where are the ups, where are the downs, where are the barriers, how can you get around them, and how can you help your organization move to a place where actually people feel, valued and empowered and, find happiness in work when they're in that workplace.
Well, how do we do it, David? That's the question we're going to answer here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. I'm kidding. Yep. The idea, though, that you share, and I've read many things you've written, that is the struggle, I think, today for my listeners is one of change and looking at things differently. As you mentioned, we don't want to do the office or do our workplaces and lead people the way we used to under old assumptions of what's important, what's priorities. How do we get our listeners a chance to share what they know about a better way, a more effective way? I know you have strong feelings about the need to bring in workplace strategy early in the process. We want to work with the architects, the designers, and get those spaces created correctly, but it doesn't mean wait till it's all said and done and then hand it off to the facilities or real estate team, does it?
No, not at all. And let's dispel one thing to start with. There isn't a competition between workplace strategy and architects. There is clearly an overlap at what we call the handshake period of time. And as workplace strategists, we don't do detailed design at all. We might produce some concepts to illustrate to the end client. The biggest challenges facing the industry today is that the general populace, the directors of real estate, the heads of HR, do not know that workplace consultant exists. The traditional model is you bring in a broker, they bring in an architect, they bring in a GC, and they go out and build stuff. And really understanding the nature of work and how people work is an art in itself, and it's kind of grown up over the last 30 years, but it doesn't have a high prominence. And yes, you're right. I believe that for the first period of our work, we sit on the client side of the table, getting immersed in their business, understanding the business process, understanding the relationship, understanding the need for collaboration, understanding the activities, the connections that go on, and how the work's actually produced. And then we provide this briefing document, which then goes on to the architect, the design teams, the technology teams, to the GC in order to develop the actual solutions for the client. So what we're really helping the client do, the end user of the space, the occupier, is come up with a really good brief for the design team and delivery team to go away and deliver. And the only way you can do that, Mike, is by getting in at the outset before ideas about test fits are done, before ideas of how much space we need are done, because that piece of work that we do at the outset impacts the design solution going forward. And if you're on a journey where you're moving from how you work today to a new way of working, there's a transition, there's a change component to that. And that by far is the hardest thing to achieve, right? Change management is a terrible term in its own right. No one likes it. Who wants to be told they're going to change, let alone my change is going to be managed for me? So I've learned over these last 30 years that truly engaging people in that process of transitioning from one way of work to another, it gives a level of acceptance that of the new space. It becomes theirs. You co-create it with them. And change management is very different to communications. Change management is involving people in the process of co-creating the change, whereas communication is about managing expectations and awareness of that journey going forward. So that's an internal struggle for us. And it might be because I don't speak the language particularly well yet, but I am learning. I'm trying to learn.
I think you're doing great. But speak to that more, David, because that's really fascinating to me, that element of change management and the need to communicate. I always put them in the same category, but you're right. They're not the same thing.
Yeah.
Give me some picture of what it looks like to do this more effectively than we've done in the past, because I think our audience is particularly equipped or positioned to have a role in this and to share the vision. I always talk about the mission and the vision of the organization and aligning it with the skills and the contributions of the people, the workforce, and you need someone to lead, and leadership requires all of the understanding you've described, but it's hard if you're not anointed with the title or the position of decision maker leader. How do you propose my audience become influencers, if that's the right word?
We have three pillars of success, Mike, when it comes to change management. The first one is that people are engaged in the journey, which means workshops, which means surveys, which means one-to-ones, which means interviews. There's a whole range of different mechanisms for engagement. And engagement means taking on board what you've heard and applying it to the solution that you're creating for the end user. The second is communication. Communication and change do go hand in hand, because communication is about awareness and managing expectation for the individual who's receiving it. But the third thing, and often the most important thing in change management, is that the sponsor of the project has to come from the core business. It simply does not work if you have the director of real estate or the VP of real estate or HR, IT leading, because people in the core business don't have time for and don't listen to those kind of roles. They don't have the necessary gravitas in their world. It has to be someone from the core business. So change management, communication, and a sponsor from the core business are three key elements you have to have in place before you start. And any change program, which is what we do when we create a new workplace, whether it's a relocation, a restack, or remodel, has to involve the collective responsibilities of FM, real estate, has to involve technology, has to involve HR, has to involve comms as the minimum of the core business, led by your sponsor. And the best way to do that is to create a steering committee or a project board. And that way you can bounce ideas off them from the feedback you're getting from engagement about the journey going forward. And that can give you direction on the company's message and what they want to achieve out of this. What are the opportunities and risks out of this particular project that you're working on? So I'd say those three pillars and involving those communities to create the steering group are really the key to moving your project forward.
So good and interesting, David. I feel like we're just getting into the heart of the matter and really getting into some really good stuff here, but the time is escaping us. It always goes by fast. I'll encourage everybody to reach out to you for more details and more understanding of what you as a workplace strategist can offer and what they should be thinking about. So I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you for a final thought or some piece of practical advice you might share with my audience of FM and workplace leaders as we head into the future of the workplace together. What would you say?
Very, very quickly, if I can do it quickly, I was running 2 learning lab sessions at the IFMA Facility Fusion in San Francisco, Mike. And the key takeaway from that was what I just said there, which is an aha moment for the FM leaders there, is that you need the support of real estate, technology, HR, internal comms, and the company itself to deliver any kind of major workplace program of works. And have a conversation with them, first of all, and get alignment on purpose from the sponsor. Once you're aligned on purpose, your vision statement, everything else falls into place.
Awesome. Amazing. Nicely done. David George, thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing a few minutes with me here on the Workplace Innovator podcast.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.
As did I. And thank you all for joining us again today on the show. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for that. Please hit subscribe or share and get more people aware of these videos. They're relatively new. Most of our listeners and people in the audience are consuming on podcast-only audio platforms like Apple and Spotify. I hope you're there enjoying it as well. But everyone who is getting something of value from this program, I appreciate it when you do share the podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about David and the work he does, check the show notes for this episode. And I hope that you will continue to join me as we continue on our journey to encourage and inspire you to be a workplace innovator. Peace out, everybody.